In Rome, power was never inherited safely. It was seized, defended, and often paid for in blood. And, few understood this better than Agrippina. So you have to imagine this scene. An astrologer delivers a chilling prophecy. Your infant son will one day rule the Roman Empire, but he's also going to be the one who kills you. For most people, that's a curse, right? A horrifying prediction. But for Agrippina, her response was, let him kill me, provided he rules. It was a bargain, a deal she was willing to make, her life for an emperor. And this dark pact, well, it was going to define everything. You see, Agrippina learned about power the hard way, through loss, a whole lot of loss. She was the great-granddaughter of the legendary Augustus, but that noble bloodline didn't shield her from anything. Her celebrated father, the General Germanicus, dies suddenly in the east, and there are all these whispers of poison. Then her mother, Agrippina the Elder, she refuses to stay quiet. She actually points the finger at Emperor Tiberius. And for that defiance, she gets exiled to some forgotten island and is literally starved to death. That's the world she grew up in. So what do you learn from a childhood like that? Well, you'll learn some pretty brutal lessons. That virtue, that's not going to protect you. Having a legitimate complaint, that's no defense. An open defiance, that's just a quick path to destruction. Then she had a front row seat for her own brother, Caligula, who gets absolute power and just goes completely mad. His reign of terror ends with her own exile in AD 39. So she learned to be invisible, to wait. She understood that in Rome, power isn't about being right. It's about being the last one standing. But then, in AD 41, Caligula gets assassinated. And for Agrippina, this wasn't the end of a nightmare. It was an opportunity. In all the chaos, the Praetorian Guard finds her uncle, Claudius, of all people, hiding behind a curtain, and they just declare him emperor. Can you picture that? The news must have felt like the first crack of light under a prison door for her. She's called back to Rome, and this time she's not coming back as a victim. No, she's coming back as a player, and she has one goal, to get right back to the center of the storm. In her comeback, well, it was a masterclass in political strategy. She's patient. She watches as Claudius's wife, the notorious Messalina, basically self-destructs in a massive public scandal that gets her executed. And in that power vacuum, Agrippina doesn't beg. She presents herself as the solution. She actually convinces the Senate to change the law so she can marry her own uncle, Claudius. A year after that, she gets the aging emperor to adopt her son, Lucius. See what she did? She didn't just return to the palace as a survivor. She came back as its future queen. Her new status was then cemented with some really unprecedented honors. She's given the title Augusta, which was already a huge deal. But then she starts appearing on coins right alongside the emperor. This had never happened before for a living empress. It was a clear signal to everyone in the empire. She wasn't just the emperor's wife. She was his partner in power. And from that position, she starts cleaning house, methodically getting rid of anyone loyal to the memory of Messalina. Next up, she secures the two pillars of Roman rule, the mind and the sword. For the mind, she brings the brilliant philosopher Seneca back from exile to be her son's tutor. His job? To mold this boy into a smart, articulate future emperor. And for the sword, she appoints a soldier named Burrus, a man who was completely and totally loyal to her as the sole commander of the Praetorian Guard. So now, you have intellect and force, word and weapon, all working for her son, who, by the way, gets a new name, Nero Claudius Caesar. But you know how it goes. As Agrippina's power soared, Claudius started having second thoughts. This aging emperor began looking at his own biological son, Britannicus, with a bit more affection. People overheard him, maybe after a little too much wine, muttering about, correcting injustices, restoring the natural line of succession. Agrippina knew this was bad news. Claudius was impressionable, a threat, and he had to be removed before he could undo everything she'd worked for. The plan she came up with was just cold, clinical. The weapon was a specialized poison, sourced from the notorious poisoner Locusta. The delivery system was a dish of mushrooms, one of Claudius's absolute favorite foods. But the initial dose didn't kill him fast enough, so the final stroke? A physician, we don't know if he was in on it or just a fool, slides a feather dipped in a stronger poison down the emperor's throat, pretending to help him vomit. And just like that, in October of AD 54, Claudius was dead. At just 16 years old, Nero became the youngest sole ruler of the Roman Empire. And the transition? It was flawless. They actually kept Claudius's death a secret for a bit, just long enough for Agrippina, Seneca, and Burrus to make sure the Praetorian Guard was on their side. When they finally made the announcement, Nero was presented to the world not as a possibility, but as a fact. The architect had finished her masterpiece. So for the first few years of Nero's reign, Agrippina's power was just absolute. I mean, she's named a priestess of the now deified Claudius, and she tries to rule right alongside her son, like a co-regent, something Rome had never seen. She's on the coins with him. She's receiving foreign ambassadors from a throne right next to his. For a fleeting moment, she was the most powerful woman in Roman history, period. But the first challenge, it came from the very men she had put in power. There's this moment where a foreign delegation arrives, and Agrippina moves to sit on a throne equal to Nero's to receive them. But Seneca and Burrus step in. They persuade Nero to stop her. It's about appearances, they argue. The emperor's authority has to look singular, absolute. And Nero, he agrees. It might seem like a small thing, but it was a profound shift. The men she appointed were now teaching her son how to rule without her. As Nero starts pushing for more independence, he falls for a former slave girl, starts ignoring his mother's advice, Agrippina just loses it. In a moment of pure rage, she says the one thing she should never have said. She reminds Nero that Claudius's son, Britannicus, is still alive, a viable alternative to the throne. She meant it as a threat, a way to pull him back in line. But for Nero, it was a terrifying revelation. His own mother saw him as replaceable. And Nero, well, he had learned his mother's lessons all too well. In AD 55, at a palace dinner party, Britannicus suddenly collapses and dies, poisoned, on Nero's orders. With that one move, Nero gets rid of his last dynastic rival and completely severs his mother's biggest piece of leverage over him. He's now truly alone on the throne. And his attention turns to the last person standing in the way of his absolute power, Agrippina herself. What happened next is almost hard to believe. It was the series of increasingly bizarre and theatrical murder plots. First, he tried poison, but she'd been expecting it for years and had been taking antidotes, so that didn't work. Then, he rigs the ceiling in her bedroom to collapse on her. She gets a warning and escapes. So then he builds this special boat designed to fall apart and sink while she's on it. The boat does fall apart, but Agrippina, she's a strong swimmer. She just swims to shore. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. At this point, Nero's paranoia is off the charts. He's done with subtlety. He sends a squad of soldiers to her villa with one simple instruction: finish the job. As they corner her, swords drawn, she doesn't flinch. She reportedly just bares her abdomen and shouts, "Stab my belly." A final, horrifying indictment of the son that womb had produced, the emperor that she had built. And just like that, the prophecy was fulfilled. Look, Agrippina was a master of the Roman game of power, no question. She outplayed her rivals, she bent the law to her will, and she put her own creation on the throne. But the one thing she could never, ever control was the emperor she herself had made. The ruthless logic she taught her son to get power was the exact same logic he used to destroy her. And it leaves us with this chilling question, doesn't it? Was she the architect of her own destruction, or was she just the inevitable victim of the absolute power she so desperately created?